quarter Hunger Elimination Task Force meeting. We did not expect to be having a second meeting this quarter, but I've had time to think. I think in retrospect, it's good. We've had time to process the goals and objectives that were shared and to consider our experience sharing feedback in the small group breakout sessions. And I just want to say as we get started that, the Hunger Elimination Task Force is a network, and the Food Policy Council believes that that networks work best when they have an agreed upon purpose. A purpose, being different than a problem. The problem that we are addressing is hunger, but that in and of itself is not a purpose. Your input on our goal and objectives last time has been collected and will be analyzed and shared back, because that's going to inform our collective ability to be cooperative and coordinate and collaborate. So we want to make sure that everyone has a voice in determining and organizing priorities for the task force. And we also want this to be a place where you feel safe voicing and clarifying what you find essential to addressing this task. Clearly your commitment to the task force is totally voluntary, but we all know that the stakes really couldn't be higher when we're talking about hunger. We hope that you'll be making a commitment to participation and to building on our shared purpose, and to also making new relationships and strengthening existing relationships that further your own mission. So today we are going to be picking up where we left off, starting with presentations of current data and statistics for both our emergency and supplemental food system. And we're very happy that Andrew Schiff, Executive Director of the Rhode Island Community Food Bank, and Maria Cimini from the state's SNAP program are back to present. Then we're going to be discussing a potential joint project, a landscape map designed to address one of the most pressing problems facing our state food system now, which is how to safely and consistently deliver emergency and supplemental food to people who need it delivered. And we're going to want your input on this joint project. So during that part of the conversation, we hope that you will type your questions and comments into the chat box or jot them down, because we will have time during that section to discuss, and your notes will be taken and analyzed and shared back. And finally, today we're going to preview our plans for quarters 2, 3, and 4 and get your quick feedback on these first quarter meetings. So just to restate, the proposed Hunger Elimination Task Force goal is to reduce hunger and increase access to healthy, culturally appropriate food for all Rhode Island residents. A little bit different than the original mission, you reflected on this during the small group breakouts, and your input will be reviewed and shared back. So at that, I am going to turn things over to Andrew Schiff from the Rhode Island Community Food Bank.
Thanks, Nessa. Good morning, everybody. I want to apologize to folks who were at the If Impact meeting. My presentation is exactly the same as I gave there, but you'll be able to see that at least I'm consistent. So one of the main points that I want to make in this presentation is that economic insecurity creates food insecurity, and unemployment is significantly higher in Rhode Island today than it was a year ago. The state has about 45,000 fewer jobs than a year ago. Unemployed workers rely on unemployment benefits and SNAP benefits to pay the rent and to be able to feed their families. And in April through July of 2020, there were enhanced unemployment benefits. Those were the extra $600 a week that unemployed workers were getting then. And that was, of course, a huge help. But those extra benefits ended in the summer by early fall. And since then, we've seen the demand for food assistance increase across Rhode Island. So in the next slide, you see calls to 211. So when folks need food assistance in Rhode Island, they call the United Way's hotline 211, and you could see that the number of calls coming into 211 requesting food assistance increased each month, July through December 2020. The calls in 2020 were also significantly higher than the number of calls 211 got in the previous year. So in the next slide, you could see how much higher the call volume was in 2020 versus 2019. And by the December, the United Way is getting over 300 calls a day for food assistance, and they do an amazing job handling that volume and helping everyone who calls get connected with help. During this period, the Census Bureau also conducted what they call a pulse survey. They ask households lots of questions about how they're doing financially. And one of the questions is whether a household had enough food to eat in the last 7 days. And the next slide, you see that the households reporting food insufficiency in Rhode Island increased significantly from the end of October through January. So that's the same trend. And we saw at the food bank increased number of people coming for food assistance. In the next slide, you see food assistance growing through July through November. December is a little bit lower only because some of our food pantries were closed between Christmas and New Year's. But similar to the 211 calls, on the next slide, you see that the number of people coming for food assistance each month in 2020 was significantly higher than the year before. So in response, the food bank boosted our food distribution. The next slide, you can see the number of pounds of food distributed throughout the state. So during this period, we increased food distribution by 40%, just to try to keep up with this really high demand. We were able to do that in part because the General Assembly was able to send about $670,000 in CARES Act funding to the food bank, all of which was used for food acquisition and helped us be able to bring in enough food to, again, keep up with this level of demand. But, we all know the SNAP benefits are the primary defense against hunger. And I think next you're going to hear from Maria Cimini.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I don't know if anyone has a particular question that they'd like to ask Andrew at this point. I can't see if questions are coming into the chat. So Nina, maybe you can, or Andrew, you can see if there are any questions coming in. Not at this time. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Andrew. And we will ask Maria to unmute now and give us an update on the Rhode Island SNAP program.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you, Nessa, for having us back again. I'm Maria Cimini. I'm the Associate Director of Policy at the Department of Human Services. So in that role, I oversee policy for all of our programs, for Rhode Island Works and GPA and Child Care Assistance, and for SNAP. If you want to move to the next slide. So as Andrew outlined, the need for food has been extraordinary during the time of COVID, and SNAP eligibility and participation has fluctuated throughout that time because of the kind of interconnectedness of certain policy changes against other policy changes. So as Andrew shared, folks received that unemployment boost over the summer, and that $600 weekly enhanced unemployment insurance amount was counted as income for SNAP. And so we actually saw a spike in SNAP applications in March and April as the pandemic was first impacting our communities, and then a reduction in SNAP participation for those first few months of the summer because families were often ineligible for SNAP benefits financially based on the enhanced unemployment insurance. And then a spike in SNAP applications again in the fall. And so we've been kind of just trying to respond to those changes in flow of the community need over the last several months. And one of the ways that we've been trying to do that is also by maximizing all of the federal opportunities that have been available to increase access and increase SNAP dollars coming into our state and into the budgets and households of families across our state. So I'm going to spend a minute or two over providing an overview of several of those opportunities we've taken advantage of. So we are doing a maximum allotment to all SNAP households. And so since March, every month that the governor has extended the state of emergency because of the pandemic, we've been able to offer every SNAP household the maximum SNAP allotment for their household size. Typically, families might receive anywhere between $16 a month to a few $100s a month based on their household size. But since the pandemic has begun, and as we continue that state of emergency, every household gets that maximum SNAP allotment to increase their purchasing power. Additionally, through CARES Act funding, in December, we were able to provide a single $600 SNAP payment to every SNAP household with children. So every family that received SNAP in the month of December got an additional $600 SNAP allotment. And those families that applied in December but were not actually approved for SNAP until January got that one-time $600 allotment in the month of January to, again, maximize that benefit. We were thrilled that in late December, Congress, in early January, SNAP benefits were increased by 15% under the Biden administration, which again brings more dollars into the pockets of low-income families and increases purchasing power in our state. And in fact, right now, about $35 million of SNAP benefits are coming into our state each month from those issuances. And we've been able to participate in the PEBT program. This is a program that was created last spring to provide families whose children usually get free or reduced price meals at school with a benefit that allows those families to purchase the food that they would have traditionally had covered through those school meals. So PEBT, standing for Pandemic EBT, provides a boost, provides a benefit, a SNAP benefit to SNAP families whose children are traditionally getting those free or reduced price meals. And then for those families who don't get SNAP, but whose children usually get free or reduced price meals, they've gotten a separate PEBT card to provide them with that nutrition assistance as well. Earlier this year, Congress allowed for that PEBT to extend to children who were not yet school aged. And we've submitted a plan to FNS, our federal partner, to be able to extend PEBT benefits to those households with children who are under age 5. Next slide, please. One of the things that I'm sure many of you heard about and perhaps contacted us about when the pandemic hit was the challenges of SNAP recipients being able to actually utilize their SNAP benefits when they were homebound. Traditionally, FNS has required people with EBT cards to swipe that card physically, enter a PIN physically at the store. And with the quarantine and isolation during COVID, it really magnified what had always been an existing challenge for homebound folks or people with transportation or mobility issues, and that is that they couldn't always get to the store. So we both relied on a wonderful network of many of your organizations began opportunities to go shopping on behalf of SNAP recipients, but we were also able to take advantage of an FNS opportunity this summer to introduce online purchasing. So now SNAP recipients throughout the state are able to purchase their food online, enter their EBT card number the way other folks might enter a debit or credit card number, and through Amazon, certain Walmarts, and Aldi's throughout the state, they can pay for their food online and have it delivered. And through other Walmarts, pay for it online and do a curbside pickup. And we're excited that BJ's Wholesale will also be joining that online payment by the end of the month. Additionally, the restaurant meals program, which has been in Rhode Island for over a decade now, I believe, which is a program that allows SNAP households where everyone is elderly, disabled, or homeless to use their SNAP benefits at certain restaurants, and has been been available at certain Subway restaurants throughout the state of Rhode Island. We, Federal Hill Pizza in Providence, raised their hand and said that they wanted to participate as well. So we've expanded to that program, and we're looking forward to other restaurants joining that as well. And then finally, we've done a whole host of things related to the kind of processing of applications. Typically, folks have to complete a form called an interim report at 6 months after they're found eligible. We've been able to postpone that, or actually just eliminate that report until June of 2021. Typically, households have to recertify annually, and for some households, we have been able to extend that certification period. And for others, we've been able to still have them complete the recertification form, but we've been able to exempt the interview requirements, and we've been able to exempt the interview requirements for some initial applications as well. And as I said a moment ago, the summer was complicated. People got additional unemployment insurance income, and that made them lose their SNAP benefits. We were pleased with the COVID package that was passed in late December, that the unemployment boost that is happening right now through mid-March, that $300 weekly income does not count for SNAP eligibility. So households that receive SNAP and are getting unemployment with that additional $300 weekly boost, that $300 does not impact their SNAP eligibility. So we are hopeful that more households will be able to maintain both their nutrition assistance and have that financial security of that enhanced UI. Additionally, SNAP, being eligible for SNAP as a college student can be kind of complicated. College students receiving SNAP or applying for SNAP have additional eligibility criteria per the federal government, but they've had a temporary additional eligibility opportunity for college students. So if families have a FAFSA expectation of a $0 family contribution, those college students can be eligible for SNAP benefits during this time. And we're working with our public institutions of higher education to do some communication to the low-income college students that they serve or who attend classes there. I also wanted to share just a little bit of data regarding SNAP. Oh, I'm realizing that my number knocked down, but these data are from early January. In early January, we had 140,266 SNAP recipients from 85,464 SNAP households throughout the state. There's some additional data there about the households number of seniors. SNAP considers 60 senior. Number of seniors who are receiving SNAP, the number of people with disabilities receiving SNAP, households with children, with folks who are working, and so forth. So this is just a snapshot of SNAP at the moment in Rhode Island. And though DHS oversees SNAP and not other programs, I did also want to quickly mention that WIC redemption has been down in the state, and actually regionally, I was on an FNS call recently talking about that. And part of the assumption there is that because of the increase in SNAP benefits, folks might be using their SNAP and not using their WIC benefits right away. So at DHS, we've worked in partnership with the Department of Health to do some communication, giving some tips about how to balance those nutrition assistance programs in the correct manner. SNAP benefits are available to a household for a full year, but the WIC benefit is only available for 30 days. So encouraging households to be smart about how they use their varied nutrition assistance to their maximum potential is another kind of initiative that we're working on with the Department of Health. And I'm happy to take any questions that folks may have.
Yes, thank you, Maria. If anyone has a question, please either unmute or type it into the chat. We'll just wait a bit to see if there are any questions.
I do think there's a question here for Andrew about the USDA food box program.
Great.
You're going to have to read me the question.
Oh, I'm so sorry. It says, I was wondering if Andrew or someone, but I think it too, could give an update on the USDA food box program. Is it happening again in Rhode Island?
So this is a program sometimes referred to as Farmers to Families. And just the quick history is back when the program began last spring, it was with Farm Fresh. And they did an amazing job of getting locally grown food to people in need with our help at the food bank. And that was continued through the summer. And then for reasons that are still not quite understood, the program switched, and the vendor was out of Delaware. So the program stopped helping local farms, and also the vendor in Delaware kind of stopped working with us. So we really didn't know how many boxes were going to be available. They're also providing boxes to organizations beside the food bank, which is fine, but it just meant that it was difficult for us to track. Then the program ended in December. It's restarted in February. There's a new vendor based in Boston. And again, there's a lot of mystery for us about how the program is going to go. What we know now is that it's going to run through March. There's a possibility that it can be extended. And once again, there are more boxes being received by the state than just received by the food bank. And if Ken Ayars is here, I think he is, he might want to jump in.
Sure.
Oh, Ken, go ahead.
Andrew correctly terms it a bit of a mystery. It's unfortunately that the way that USDA has run the program, they don't have a point of contact. And so we all scramble to try and find out a bit how the program is administered. Long story short, currently, as Andrew said, there's a contractor in Massachusetts, Costa, that's supplying, and correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, around 1,200 boxes per week to you for your distribution through the Brown Community Food Bank, and also around 1,300 boxes per week to an organization called the Christian Community Church in Johnston for them to distribute through their network. That's really about as much as we know. Rhode Island was served by technically two contractors, one in Massachusetts that we know about, another contractor in Illinois called the Produce Alliance, also was tasked with serving Rhode Island, but we've never been able to find out if they're actually doing so, which is a problem just with how USDA runs the program. So that's as much as we can say. And as Andrew said, how it extends from here on in is really up to USDA. We know it is ongoing and probably through March, and whether it extends after that, we're not sure. We anticipate the Biden administration at some point in time will reset the program. I was on a conference call with my counterparts yesterday, and throughout New England, it's just a challenge to find out how this program is administered, where the boxes go, who's responsible. But what I just said is kind of the current conditions of the program.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken and Andrew. I don't know if there are other questions in the chat right now.
There are. If it's okay, I'll jump in, and I see 3 for me, so I'll take those right now. So starting with the easy, Diane Shemtov asked if WIC could be used online, and at this time the answer unfortunately is no. To the best of my knowledge, through communications with our WIC director here in Rhode Island, there is one state that has a small pilot to allow WIC purchases online, and they are, and in Rhode Island we are, they, being the Department of Health, are learning more about that process, but I suspect that we're pretty far away from that. Rhode Island actually just rolled out eWIC over the last 12 months period. So prior to that, WIC recipients get a paper check that they would use at the grocery store, and they've transitioned to a card-like structure in the same way that SNAP has. So folks can swipe their eWIC card, and then if they also have SNAP, they can then swipe their SNAP card and then pay whatever remaining balance with other sources of cash. But there's not the opportunity to do an online purchasing with WIC at the moment. Diane Lynch asked if any other stores could be authorized for online purchasing. So the state actually has very little role in the retailer portion side of SNAP, but any store can apply to FNS USDA to participate in online purchasing. And we had conversations with Stop and Shop many months ago about having them to apply for that process. And before the pandemic, people had been requesting online purchasing for SNAP for many, many years. And there had been, I think, a 3-year pilot project with 4 or 5 states rolling this out. And then the pandemic prompted extraordinary action on that, but there is still quite a kind of online system-based testing protocol that stores have to go through in order to be approved for that. And then farther up, Kathleen Gorman asked about participation, that there was a increase in SNAP participation in April and a decrease since then. And I think she just asked why that might be. And I think there are a couple of things that happened there. One is, as we mentioned earlier, people lost their SNAP benefits over the summer when they had the enhanced UI benefit. And we did see some spike in application in late August and September from those households losing that UI enhancement, but not as much of a spike as we had expected. We've looked internally at the department to see if there's anything that if there is anything that we could identify as the reason for the reduction, and haven't been able to identify anything on like a system side. But I think part of the issue here is that with COVID, the DHS lobbies are not open to customers. Other community agencies have limited or different types of interactions with folks. And so a lot of the ways that people who needed assistance to get through the process would have typically gotten that assistance is not available right now. And so I have no data to support this, but my assumption would be that there are people who are struggling to access the benefits that are available to them, but the traditional existing structures are not always there. And that's not to discredit the wonderful community partnerships that are still out and about and seeing people face to face and doing the work, but it certainly isn't at the same level as it had been.
Thank you, Maria. Are there any other questions to address right now, Nina?
There was one other question for Andrew from Fred about the food distributed by month, if there's a breakdown about like category of food, so produce, dairy, meat, seafood, or another type of by category of food breakdown.
Sure. I mean, the vast majority of the food provided through our network is non-perishable food, canned vegetables, cereal, peanut butter, tuna, and then a smaller percent, usually about 20% of the food distributed is fresh produce. And that, as we were describing with Farmers to Families boxes, that's bounced up and down depending on that program. But our attempt is for about 20% of the food distributed to be fresh.
Thank you, Andrew. Any other questions, Nina, before we move along?
It looks like we got to all the questions at this point.
Okay, great. A lot of issues, a lot of questions, and I thank both Andrew and Maria for those updates. Now we're going to move into kind of the last substantive part of the agenda for today, which is about opportunities for collaboration. And what we are going to do is give just really a brief outline and of a concept that the Food Policy Council and the state agencies have been discussing, and really ask for your feedback all along the way. So although we're still using the slides as a structure for just kind of putting the questions out there, we're just going to give really a framework and then ask for your input. And you can provide that input in the chat, or if you want to speak it, then you can put your name in the chat and just note that you'd like to unmute and share it. Obviously, a lot of the issues and questions that we just presented on and talked about were about food delivery, whether that food is emergency food or supplemental food. And really, since COVID, emergency and supplemental food delivery has become a major issue. Nearly everyone has been interested in having food delivered, but people who lack resources, have limited transportation, have been hindered from accessing affordable and consistent food delivery services. So a lot of the folks on this call have been doing some form of food delivery for a long time and have had structures and processes strained by increased demand or changes in needs and requirements. And then others on the line have just started doing small pilots or programs that are related to emergency and supplemental food delivery. So what we're talking about here is a creation of a statewide hunger and food delivery landscape map. And the first question that we want to put out there is really to hear from you, what is the need that you see for a map like this? What would you see as the goal and objectives and uses of a map like this? So I'd invite you to put notes into the chat, and then Nina, if there are individuals who are saying that they would like to speak, I think this is a very good time to do that, and it's more than welcome from anyone on the line. And Nina, I'll depend on you to tell me if it's time to move along, if they're.
So a few folks are adding things into the chat right now, and it looks like Diane Lynch would like to add something verbally.
Perfect.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Great, thank you. I just wanted to add that it was a really interesting example of how a map like this could be useful in our discussion today. So we are going to be having food coming from multiple sources over the course of at least the next year. And as Ken was saying, the food box program, the federal food box program, has provided boxes with very little internal coordination. Brought up the fact that there is a church operation in Johnston that's doing the distribution. We traditionally have not been able to get full visibility on what organizations like churches, charitable organizations, are doing as part of our emergency food system. And it would be great to be able to include that kind of information so that we know who is covering what. Many of these are organizations that do incredible work and have great outreach, but they're not visible to us. And I think one of the goals of this map should be to try to make visible to all of us what's going on, because it's not just churches. There are also many, many smaller pilots that we know are going on at various community-based organizations. So I certainly think that one use could be giving a full view to everyone who's interested in hunger elimination of all the activity that's going on at the ground level.
Thank you, Diane.
A lot of great things coming into the chat that I am not reading quickly as they are coming in, but it looks like Dave wanted to add a little bit, and then I think Fred had a question. So I think we'll go to Dave first.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if any of you got right before everything happened the last time we were doing this. You know, I posted up a link to a draft website we had started a few years ago that is being updated now, and it's being put under another system. But it does just as what Diane said, and a lot of people are saying, there needs to be that one-stop information resource base. It's aimed not only at the public, for them to be able to use what's out there, to know what's out there and use what's out there, but also aimed at policymakers, government, nonprofit policymakers. So there are different ways you can do it. Our goal is, and I'll repost that link up. Just remember, it's old and it's outdated, and but you'll get an idea of what we were talking about, and it's being put under a much more comprehensive and better system to have that. So anything that any agency that's working on this, to list specific resources and have them in a searchable database. So somebody can just put in food delivery, and then all the different resources. They can either get it by agencies, a list of agencies, or a list of the actual resources. So it's a much more effective and efficient way for people to find what's out there. It would allow agencies to be like a news center. So any agency or anybody working this can post press releases. We can link to news articles that are out there. We can let people blog and stuff. So again, all this stuff is out there in one space, whatever you want to call it, that people can easily find it and that are linked to other things. So I can send out more details. We're putting it together. We're putting together a little group just to work on this. And I've mentioned to Nessa and Nina that we'll be happy to work with the Food Policy Council on this. If it's something they want to do, we can work with them to do it. Doesn't mean we have to necessarily do it. Our goal is to work with agencies and provide free assistance for them to do things like this if that's what they want to do and they think it's useful. So we can have that discussion with them. But again, you'll get the idea of what we're talking about and then go from there. But I think that's what's the most essential thing, because I can tell you we're looking at doing this across all issues throughout the state, and there's a real problem with just any segment that's either working on or using it, finding this information efficiently or as efficiently as possible. So I think that's the biggest need to start, and then you can build on that.
Thank you. And we will put the site, the link in the notes and follow up with you about that.
Okay. Again, just remember it's old, it's outdated, but we're currently in the process of updating a lot of that stuff. So.
Fred, did you still want to ask a question?
Yes. I don't know if I direct this to Andrew or not, but because some of this we've discussed in the past, but the fishermen here are no different than any other harvesters, be it farmers, dairy, and struggling with lower prices because the demands aren't there. So any way we can generate more sales and more fish to be landed would be a benefit to this industry economically, no doubt. But I need some guidelines. I need some assistance in here because I can go out and seek funding. We already have close to 6 months under our belt of the seafood donations program, where last week we put 3,000 pounds of whole fish out to the local communities. And we continue to do that. And I would like to, because we're going to come into a spring, summer, and fall, where there'll be more of an abundance of fish. Boats will be able to fish closer to home. They'll be able to fish more, many more days, as opposed to this time of year when it's salacious. So the guidelines I'm looking for is, does everything have to be frozen? Can we do chowders? Can we do fish cakes? Can I H&G head and gut like a whiting and a hake and put them in an IQF so that we can hand those out to people? So any of those objectives and guidelines would be extremely helpful so that we could put together a plan. I'd love to be able to put out 5,000 or 10,000 pounds of fish every month into a program like this. I think it's a great, healthy resource. And I mean, everybody benefits from it. The industry will benefit, and obviously all those people and families in need.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fred. Andrew, go ahead.
No, I just say we'd be happy to work with you on that. We've put a lot of thought into it, and we could respond really quickly.
Okay, I'll communicate with you via email. Thank you.
Great. I think what I'd like to do is just invite folks to continue considering this particular question about the goal, objectives, and uses of the landscape map in the chat, and move on to the next set of questions, which digs a little bit deeper into what the map would actually present. What data is critical? What data is available? And we've done a little bit of brainstorming here around thinking about mapping homebound and limited mobility populations, around the pilots and programs that are currently serving these populations, identifying where there are gaps in service. And then also just wanted to note that the council, in collaboration with the state agencies and other groups like Age Friendly Rhode Island, is interested in conducting research to inform the Hunger Elimination Task Force about the impacts of particular programs. We know that there's an awful lot going on, but not many of us have the capacity to really do an evaluation plan that looks at the impacts and costs and benefits relative to each other. So that's something that we are interested in continuing to work on, and a potential place for collaboration with members of the task force. So, some data is impossible to get, some is just hard to get, and other data is easy. So this question is really about what data you feel is most critical if we're going to start out on this, and what you feel is actually available. Again, I'd invite you to put thoughts in the chat. We're going to collate this and share it back. And if there's anyone who wants to speak about that, to just put your name in the chat, note that you'd like to say something, and then Nina can identify you.
And just to add, thank you, Cindy, for mentioning this in the chat. If folks, when they're speaking, can just say their name and their organization briefly, that's really helpful as well, since I know some folks haven't met each other.
I'll just give another maybe 15, 20 seconds for people to type in answers. This is not your only opportunity. This is just your first opportunity. So I'll go ahead and advance. I'm really looking forward to seeing what everyone has put into the chat. And just note that finally, the last thing we wanted to talk about on this call was about formats. So we really want whatever we're doing in terms of a landscape map to be easily usable for a large variety of people and organizations. There are a number of different options to consider. Diane, I don't know if you want to talk about some examples that you think might be useful. We've mapped out a few of them here. It could be an interactive GIS map, a searchable database, something else. We'd want to know what's most useful for you in your work.
I add my thoughts to that, Nessa. I think many of the people on this call have used some of the various GIS maps that have come out over the last few years. Providence Plan had a whole set of them, and in the initial part of the heft under Sue, there were a bunch of maps that were created, and mapping technology is now really good, and it can give you a visual sense of where things are. So I hope that we can include some kind of geographic mapping, because actually some people have actually already put in the chat the fact that there's less visibility on what's going on in our more rural and further out, less dense suburban areas. And we really need to make sure that we cover those as well. We don't know as much about what's going on out there. So that I would urge us to consider using GIS mapping. And I know that Kim and a bunch of folks here who regularly use database analysis and mapping can help us in terms of getting formats that are really easy to use. Then the other thing I wanted to mention is searchable databases, because they are also a great way of taking a big, complicated set of data and allowing somebody to go in and just pull out exactly what they want. So that's something that we've played with a little bit at the Food Policy Council. Nina has done some work with a searchable database, and I know that there are folks on this call who can help with that as well. But that's something that can be posted on the web, and that anyone, completely open to the public, anyone can go in and use.
Thanks, Diane. I add that I have had a couple bit different folks reach out to talk about levels and kind of like levels of searchability, and particularly folks who are in HES groups really being interested in that zip code data, like the really small neighborhood level data, and kind of talking about how a lot of the data is just at the county level and really not that useful for thinking about things on a community by community basis. So thinking about different levels at which we're providing the data geographically, I think, is going to be an important point. Nina, does anyone else want to speak at this time about optimal formats or anything else?
It doesn't look like it. I'll just pull out the few different folks that mentioned the importance around format and potentially making sure that in addition to these online formats, that there's also ways that folks don't have internet access and are likely folks who really need the food security resources can access that easily. And also some great comments about making sure we're connecting with 211 to make sure there's not redundancy, but really synergy and increasing the value of both of those resources.
Thank you very much, Nina. Helpful. And I see we almost have 100 comments now in the chat, so that's an impressive level of engagement. I'm going to move us to kind of some just closing comments. We talked about this part 2 meeting lasting about 45 minutes. We're going a little bit over, so hopefully you all can hang out just for a few more minutes. Thank you so much for all of the feedback that you provided during both of these meetings. We really understand that in order to drive objectives forward across the span of a whole year, that we need to have, cover a variety of different issues. So the way that we're thinking about this is that having from this time on, having each quarter have a specific area of focus. You can see the kind of draft areas of focus that we have laid out here. These are not written in stone. We're happy to take advice and suggestions related to these. Our concept is that we will each quarter have breakout sessions after we have presentations, and that we will have note takers in those breakout sessions, that we will review and analyze the notes and share back themes during the following quarterly meeting, and also in the interim time period. So we've developed these concepts for second, third, and fourth quarter areas of focus using results from outreach done by the governor's office and the state agencies during COVID, and also preliminary research done by URI researchers, as well as the Food Policy Council's stakeholder survey and other sources. So as you can see, what we're thinking for the second quarter is to lift up effective community-based food justice and public health initiatives. For the third quarter, to talk about connecting local food and our emergency feeding network. So kind of what Fred and Andrew were just doing in real time on the call, and extending that to think about not just fish, but also land-based food and potential for federal programs to turn back toward supporting both our local fishermen and farmers and our food insecure community. And then in the fourth quarter, having a focus perhaps on prepared emergency food. So stuff that folks like Meals on Wheels have been doing for a very long time, and then other entities like Hope in Maine have been doing since this pandemic started as well. So we welcome your thoughts about speakers for panels. We welcome your thoughts about different ideas. Obviously, these are the 3 quarters of 2021, but there will be other meetings. And also, depending on how much interest there is at these quarterly meetings, there's always the potential to break out into work groups to work more together. So the last thing that I'd like to do today is to evaluate the first Hunger Elimination Task Force meetings of 2021, so we can identify what went well and what improvements we can make so that the benefit from this process, so that we can all benefit from this process and keep learning. So the way I'd like to do this is through the chat. So I'd like to just ask you to first identify strengths, the things that we felt went well. And then after that, we'll talk about what might be improved. And again, we will do an analysis of this feedback and identify the improvement suggestions that have strong support for implementation. So if you could, using the chat, each of you identify one thing that you liked about this process and the way that it worked. And I'll give folks, maybe 15 seconds to type into the chat. Okay, I think that's about 15 seconds. I don't have a stopwatch, but I'd like to move on to the ways to improve. So apart from the horrible thing that happened with the Zoom bombing on the first call, I'm sure that there were other things during these 2 meetings where, and during this process where you said, I wish we'd done that differently. And so you might have other improvement suggestions you thought about as well. And so I want to ask what you would like to see done differently next time. What would have made this process better? And again, I'll pause for about 15 seconds so you can type those answers and thoughts into the chat. Thank you so much for your feedback and for your time and thought. In our role as the coordinator of the Hunger Elimination Task Force, we are really looking forward to recognizing you and helping you capitalize on opportunities and clarify shared interests and finding resources to help this task force achieve its purpose. You can see our contact information there. That's for Diane Lynch, Chair of the Food Policy Council, and then every staff member of the Food Policy Council. We don't have dates set yet for our other meetings, but they will take place in May, August, and November. And the last thing I want to do is mention some upcoming events. We have on February 24th from 10 to noon, Examining Food Insecurity in Rhode Island. That's from the Rhode Island Public Health Institute and Grow Smart Rhode Island. Then on March 10th, we have the business case for reducing, rescuing, and recycling wasted food from the Center for Ecotechnology and Business and Service Providers. And then lastly, we have program support and funding opportunities for the beginning or established producer from 10 to 11:30 with the Rhode Island USDA Farm Service Agency and our DEM. And all of those events will also be included in the notes that we send out, but just wanted to give you an update right now as to those events. You can mark your calendars. Thank you so much for your time. We will get the notes and recording out. It will take us a little bit longer than usual because we do want to do a little bit of light analysis first. And I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of the day and a great weekend. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.